Hey everybody, welcome. So before I get Sajid on, just wanted to say it's going to be a live video. This is something that I did as a candidate. I'm a Gilroy City Council member, and I really appreciated it. Just sort of chatting with my friends and business owners, kind of like livens things up a little bit, kind of let you get the candidate to know the candidate just a little bit more. I've got a series of questions that you all gave me ahead of time. Some of the ones that were provided beforehand, we'll go through those, and then at any time you have questions that you want to ask, feel free to put that down there not necessarily in the comments, but if you could put in the questions, that'll help us kind of like keep things flowing. So we'll give about another like 10 or 20 seconds or so before we start. I'll find Sajid on here, ask him to join us. And so thank you all for being here. See if that works. Hey,
Hey Zach, how's it
how are
going?
you? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just kind of hustling around through the workday.
Nice,
Nice to be
nice,
here with you.
nice. Definitely. All right, so let's kick this off. Before we do, I just really want to tell everybody and just really emphasize get out to vote. It's in between presidential races, and a lot of times people say the primaries or the midterms are not necessarily as popular. It is ever more important locally for you to pay attention to who is on the ballot this year. Sajid is running for district attorney of Santa Clara County. That's going to be on the June 7th primary. As long as you get in there, you register to vote. You will get your ballots mailed to you. Everybody gets a ballot mailed, usually around the first or second week of May. And voting day is June 7th. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for Santa Clara County DA.
Yeah, thanks Zach. Great to be here with you. So, hi everybody. My name is Sajid Khan, and I'm running for Santa Clara County District Attorney. I'm the proud son of Muslim immigrants who settled here in the South Bay and raised me and my siblings here. I grew up in Milpitas in San Jose, went to San Jose High School, and now am raising my two young sons here in the South Bay. And for the last 13 and a half years, I've served our community as a deputy public defender, working to represent the rights and dignity of our community's most vulnerable people. And in that time, I've witnessed our system perpetuate the harms of mass incarceration, really inflict generational trauma on communities of color, and fail to keep us all collectively and sustainably safe. And so it's for those reasons that I'm running for district attorney. And I'm running for DA because I'm committed to healing systemic racism, fighting mass incarceration, addressing root causes of crime and harm in our communities, and ultimately building a justice system that protects and ensures the dignity and safety of all people here in Santa Clara County, which, as I mentioned, is the place that I've called home my entire life. And so when I'm elected DA, hopefully with everyone's support, we will do the following things. We'll invest in mental health and substance abuse treatment and alternatives to incarceration. We'll invest in ensuring that survivors of harm receive trauma-informed care. We'll hold police accountable when they violate the law and they violate the dignity and safety of our people. And we'll also address the school to prison pipeline, which we know is a very real kind of generational tragedy that it impacts communities of color. And so it's for those reasons that I'm running for DA. I'm thankful, Zach, for your support and really excited to be able to share this conversation in this space with you.
Great. So let's start off with our first question. When did you know that you wanted to serve the public as an attorney as opposed to going into the private sector?
So I grew up, as I mentioned, the son of immigrants who raised me and my siblings here in the Bay Area in Santa Clara County. My dad worked in the semiconductor industry, and my mom was a clinical lab scientist at O'Connor Hospital here in San Jose. But it was almost like those were their secondary careers, because what I witnessed most from them were lives of service. They were always, especially in the local Muslim community, very active in community service, very active politically, attending protests and going to city council meetings, things like that. And so I knew very early on that I also wanted to live a life of service, and if I could do so through a career of service, even better. My oldest brother went to law school. His name was Suhail. And so I knew very early on that my path to service would be through the law. And the other component of it was um, Malcolm X was a real seminal figure in my childhood and in our household. My father looked up to him. We talked about him a lot. We read his autobiography and watched the Denzel Washington movie. And he was just a seminal figure that really embodied service, transformation, standing up against injustice, fighting for the rights of the marginalized in our communities. And so all of those values and all of what was kind of cultivated in me resulted in me wanting to go to law school. And then when I went to law school, I wanted to do civil rights work. And then I quickly took a class called criminal procedure in law school, which teaches us about the Fourth and Fifth and Sixth Amendments, especially about our rights to be free from unreasonable police searches and seizures. And it was during that class that I really had my eyes open to the realities of the living experiences of people of color in our communities, especially in terms of how police and law enforcement oftentimes discriminate, engage in racial profiling. And I wanted to be on the front lines fighting to really breathe life into that constitutional right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures and to protect the rights of our most marginalized community members. And so that's what led me to this career path of becoming a public defender, and I've never really looked back until now, this new crossroads of running for DA.
Definitely. What is Santa Clara County's single biggest challenge, and how will you mitigate it?
I think the biggest challenge is the disparities in lifestyle, the disparities in income, disparities. We've really seen the pandemic, especially exacerbate what were already very drastic disparities between the haves and the have-nots in our community. And we're seeing it more so now. We're seeing homelessness very much front and center in our neighborhoods, and we're seeing people living on the margins of our community. And then we're also seeing, but we also see such wealth in our communities as well. You go across Santa Clara County and you go to cities like Cupertino and Mountain View and in where I'm living now in the Rose Garden in San Jose, and there's such wealth, there's such abundance. But then within feet of me, are people living in tents and struggling to make ends meet. And so I think leveling the playing field for people in our community, ensuring that everyone in our community, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of socioeconomic background, has access to their full dignity, access to education, healthcare, vocational training, mental health services, clean water, healthy food, and ensuring that it's not just afforded to those living in middle class to affluent neighborhoods of our community, and ensuring that everyone in our community has access to that dignity. And as district attorney, we have the ability to effectuate real change. First is by addressing the people that are coming through our criminal legal system. In my experience, people that come through our criminal legal system already are living on the margins of our community, disproportionately, already suffering from poverty and underserved schools and mental illness and lack of vocational training or access to adequate housing. And then when they come into our system, those already established disparities are not made better by our criminal legal system. They're actually exacerbated and made worse. And then people are spit out on the other side of our systems, and then they're further marginalized and they're further pushed to the edges because now they have a criminal conviction on their record. It's harder to get a job. It's harder to have housing. They've now experienced the trauma of being incarcerated. They've been separated from their families. And so as DA, we need to see people in their full humanity and see why they have come before us in the criminal legal system, and then address them as full human beings. Of course, hold them accountable if they've done harm and ensure restoration for survivors of that harm, but also ensure that when they come before us, that they are addressed as full human beings and that we are addressing their root needs so that when they come out of our system, they are better off than before they came before us. And that one is just just from a human dignity perspective, really critical. And then also just from a perspective of keeping our communities safe. When we invest in people's well-being, they are less likely to engage in harmful behavior, and then that cultivates long-term sustainable safety in our communities.
How will you interact with residents in order to stay in touch with the needs of the community? What's your plan?
Well, the first thing as I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, is that I'm from here. I was born at the old Alexan Brothers Hospital in San Jose. I grew up in Milpitas. My family moved to San Jose when I was in high school. I've ridden my bike here. I've taken the bus here, the light rail, Caltrain. I still live in San Jose. I'm a very active father with my children. I was just out at the Little League field yesterday and at the flag football field over the weekend. And so I consider myself to be a regular member of our community, and will continue to maintain that spirit once elected as DA, in terms of just being present, being around, walking our neighborhoods, being an active parent in my child's lives. But then from a district attorney's perspective, ensuring that the DA's office is accessible. And that means ensuring that we have language access for the very diverse community that is part of Santa Clara County, to ensure that we are delivering services and accessibility in a language accessible way. That means that we partner with community groups, whether it be faith-based organizations, nonprofits, other local electeds like yourself, to hold Instagram lives like this and regular forums, so that the people in Gilroy know that the DA's office is accessible to them, that there are services available. The people in Palo Alto know, because there is regular contact with those communities, and essentially working with community organizations, community members, electeds as conduits to the DA's office, to ensure that people know that they are going to be met by a DA's office that is culturally competent, that is trauma informed, that is accessible, that is going to be a source of healing as opposed to a source of kind of harm and punishment in our communities. And so I think those are all going to be, require a real collective effort to ensure the office is accessible to the community. And I'm really excited to be able to help cultivate that.
So why should residents vote for you as opposed to the other candidates in the field?
Yeah, this is definitely a unique moment in Santa Clara County. It's a unique moment in the state of California, and it's also a unique moment in our country for a number of reasons. We saw, after the killing of George Floyd, an uprising and in our community, a demand from our community that was unlike any other, at least in my lifetime. And it was a demand that we no longer cut corners or put band-aids on what has been a centuries-old problem of systemic racism in our community that has manifested in the killing of George Floyd and the killing of countless people of color by police in our country, has manifested in our systems of mass incarceration that really does leave generational harm on communities of color. And so there is a palpable demand in our community for true reform and true transformation, not at the edges, but at the core of our criminal legal system, to invest in mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment, as opposed to investing in incarceration, to treat children like children, to hold police accountable. The other thing that makes this moment unique is that we just saw the appointment of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the United States Supreme Court, or the nomination of her to the United States Supreme Court, the first Black woman to be appointed or nominated to that seat. And she's a former public defender as well. And there's a recognition that public defenders are uniquely situated and qualified to be the answer to these societal harms that are continuing to be present in our communities. Because I, as a public defender, Judge Jackson, as a public defender, have been in our jails. I've been in our neighborhoods. I've been in our courtrooms. I have learned firsthand from the people that I represent the stories of what has brought them into our criminal legal system. What are the root causes of the harms that they're accused of, And that makes us uniquely qualified to actually to address those harms proactively. What do we need to do as a community to prevent crime from happening in the first place? It means investing in our schools, investing in education, investing in mental health treatment, healthcare, housing. And then if someone does come before us in the criminal legal system, how do we respond in a way that does hold people accountable, but is not solely centered on punishment and incarceration, but is instead focused on how do we ensure that this harm doesn't happen again? And how do we ensure that survivors of the harm receive the services and the interventions that they need so that their hurt does not perpetuate or does not roll into more hurt in our communities? And so I think it's a really unique moment where we're reimagining who is qualified to lead us in this new era of Santa Clara County. And my lived experience as a resident of this county, as a father in this community, and then as a public defender, having litigated every type of case in this community, makes me uniquely qualified to lead us into this new era where we are fighting for dignity and safety of all people, while also addressing the real harms of systemic racism and mass incarceration. Last couple things I'll say on that point is that Santa Clara County is a very progressive place when you look at how our voters vote on criminal justice reform measures on the statewide ballots, like ending the death penalty, reclassifying certain crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, juvenile justice. Our voters in this county overwhelmingly support criminal justice reform. But we've been represented by an incumbent DA that has oftentimes stood against those reforms. You know, our voters, for example, voted to end the death penalty back in 2016, but our incumbent DA continued to pursue the death penalty until as recently as 2020. Our DA continues to prosecute children as adults and actually fought the law that stopped the practice of prosecuting 14 and 15-year-old children as adults. Our incumbent DA has not prosecuted a single San Jose police officer who's been responsible for the killing of 20 people in the last 5+ years in our community, 17 of which were people of color. And so our county's values are not being matched by our district attorney, and I'm hopeful that when I'm elected that I will be a representative of the values of our county and also of the diversity of our county.
Why should the youth care about voting and politics, and how will you engage the youth?
Yeah, it's you know, the DA seat, when it was last contested in 2010, was decided by 3,500 votes. So in Santa Clara County, where it's over approximately 2 million people, 15 cities, the district attorney, which is a really significant seat in any community, was decided by 3,500 votes. So 3,500 18-year-olds who have the ability to vote for the first time could swing the election this year and really make a difference in charting forward a new era in criminal justice in the county, let alone impacting places like Gilroy or Santa Clara or Sunnyvale or Mountain View, where it is small margins of voters that can make a difference in swinging elections and ensuring that local electeds are the people that we actually want pushing the buttons in terms of how we fund our schools, how we fund our police departments, how we fund substance abuse and mental health treatment, whether or not we're going to be building a new jail in Santa Clara County or not, or investing that money in other alternatives to incarceration. And so, so youth have the ability to make direct impact at the ballot box by electing people that are commensurate with their values. And then we're also seeing young people just get elected. The days of waiting your turn are over. One of our endorsers, his name is Omar Dean. I grew up with him. He's like a family friend. I think he's 23, right out of college, just got elected to the Sunnyvale City Council in one of the last election cycles. And so there is a more direct line, more than ever, there's a direct line, especially through social media and the advents of Instagram and Facebook and Instagram lives like this, where we're able to effectuate change in a much more direct way. Um, and so I think that's why it's really critical that young people no longer wait their turn and instead utilize these platforms to make sure that their voices are heard. And then how we're going to utilize and empower young people in our campaign. It's really exciting. We've had a number of different canvases already. We've started our field program. Young people are coming out to walk with us. I think we've staffed a few interns for the campaign. We have an organizer that we hired who's a young recent college graduate from UC Santa Cruz, young man of color, who we're paying as an organizer to help us in our campaign effort, and he's empowering other young people to join us. And I'm really hopeful that our campaign, again, will be representative of our community and be a welcoming one for young people to be activated and involved. Because, as I've alluded to, our criminal legal system is impacting young people regardless whether we know it or not. And so if we can empower young people to take back control, it would be really incredible.
Yeah, and I want to thank you. You provided the opportunity for my student interns, me with my council member office, to ask you questions. And as you know, one of the reasons why I asked that is they wanted me to ask you. I wanted to ask you, but I'm sure you were impressed with the questions and the intellect that they have at such a young age. So it's so important to keep them engaged, and I really appreciate that. So speaking of age, has getting older changed your views on justice in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. A few thoughts come to mind. I'm now 39 years old. As I mentioned, I'm a father of two boys. I think fatherhood, generates a unique perspective that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have the boys. In thinking about what kind of community do I want to raise them in, when I'm gone, what kind of world will they be living in? What kind of values will be manifesting in our neighborhoods and in our places of power. And so I think that's really been a critical perspective shift, just in terms of, having the long view of these children, my boys, your children, my nephews and nieces that are growing up here, and just thinking about what kind of society that I want them to live in as they get older. And then, as a public defender, I have been very active fighting in the courthouse for the rights of our people and kind of clawing against the system. And it's been very meaningful work, but I've recognized that it has a ceiling. The individual representation of people, it's been such beloved work to me, but I recognize that there was a ceiling to it in terms of its broader impact and my ability to effectuate systemic change on issues that I think I can't control in the individual representation of people that I serve. And so that's what was really attractive about this possibility of running for district attorney, is about taking my lived experiences as a public defender and the values that I bring to that work: compassion, mercy, redemption, empathy, and then trying to harness them and manifest them on a broader scale, as opposed to living in my public defender silo and doing so for the rest of my career, which would be meaningful. But I think that there is a unique moment where my talents and my lived experiences and my values can be broadcasted and amplified in a more significant way. And also how I do that in a way that is inviting to people to join us in this cause, as opposed to one that's kind of toxic or polarizing or divisive, where I'm pointing fingers at people and saying like, hey, it's just create a different mindset. Like, the way that we're going to effectuate long-term sustainable change is through a collaborative, inviting, but also a truth-telling effort, as opposed to one that's more divisive. And so that's where my growth has come in terms of transitioning from public defender space now into running for DA and trying to achieve, again, broader systemic reform.
What role can the DA's office play in ending the revolving door of homelessness, mental health crisis, and jail?
Oh, I think most people overlook how significant a role the DA plays in these systems and in the lived realities of people living on the margins of our community. I went to this a really sad, tragic event earlier this year, or maybe it was late last year, where there was a memorial service for the people that have died on San Jose streets because of that were homeless essentially in the last in 2021, and it was a really large number of people. And I sat there at this service and I thought to myself, how many of these people had come before us in our criminal legal system? And I'd imagine many of them had, because of the criminalization of poverty and the criminalization of homelessness. And how many of them were met by a system that made their situations worse? And I imagine that most of them were. That, they came into our system maybe because they were accused of a harm, or because they were, again, criminalized through our system. And our system didn't see them as a full human being and did not respond to them with interventions that actually made their lived experiences better. And so a DA has significant power in terms of what we charge and then what we seek as our responses to harm. What I've experienced is I've seen a DA's office that has engaged in overcharging of our community members, has engaged in a practice and pursuit of convictions at all costs, has engaged in defining justice by months in jail and years of incarceration, as opposed to actually healing people and actually ensuring that people who have done harm in our communities are receiving the interventions and services that make them better off in our communities as opposed to worse. And so a DA first has to be committed to the full dignity of all people in our community, including those who have done harm in our community, and not define people by their worst moments. And then respond with charging decisions and interventions that take into account people's humanity, and actually respond with evidence-based interventions that hold them accountable, but also ensure their capacity for rehabilitation. The other thing I'll say is that our DA's budget is over $150 million. And we spend a lot of that budget prosecuting children as adults, prosecuting 3 strikes enhancements, having prosecuted the death penalty. Imagine if we stopped those harmful, very racially disparate practices and instead utilized those significant resources and tried to shift them into the front end of our communities, where, again, as I've talked about, we invest resources in our schools, in our educational, vocational programs, reentry programs, mental health services, substance abuse counseling. We can greatly prevent harm from happening in the first place, as opposed to merely punishing it when it does. And so we have an opportunity, again, to kind of change the fabric and culture of Santa Clara County and move away from a very carceral, punitive system, and instead a system that is really humane, dignified, and invested in healing people.
Last question here, and I just wanted to give you time to kind of sum up what you've really talked about, but what's the biggest reason behind your belief in reform versus punishment?
It's just my lived experiences that I'm a Muslim man. I'm a man of faith, and I have grown up with values of compassion, mercy, redemption. I truly believe that none of us is, not all of us are more than our worst moments, that we are not defined by the worst thing that we've ever done. And I have seen that firsthand in our jails. I've sat with people that have been accused of the worst harms you can imagine. And I've really loved those experiences. I've come to have really special connections with people that have done harmful things. And I don't believe that harmful behavior is necessarily indicative of who they are or who they can be with the right services and interventions, love and support. But we've been operating in a system that does define people by their worst moments, especially people of color. That does ensnare people in our criminal legal system, and it creates generational harm. And I don't think I think there's a different way forward. I know there's a different way forward. And I know that when we invest in the full dignity and well-being of our people, including those who have done even the most serious harms, that there is a different path forward, and we can actually cultivate real sustainable public safety, and we can change the fabric of our communities of color in particular, and we can undo the the cycle of suffering that is going on in our communities. And so just to kind of summarize, yeah, it's rooted in my kind of faith background, but also my lived experiences, and also just recognize my own humanity. I'm now, like I mentioned, I'm 39 years old. I'm not who I was when I was 16, 17. I don't think you are either, Zach. You know, like we evolve, we change, life circumstances change. And I think that we need to cultivate a system that recognizes, especially for young people, that just because you committed a harm when you're 16, 17, 18, that's not who you necessarily will be or have to be when you're older. And how can we cultivate a system that is actually investing in people's healing and rehabilitation, as opposed to investing in their punishment. And the last thing I'll say is the old adage of hurt people hurt people. It holds true. So many in our systems have been survivors of or victims of harm themselves. Child abuse, neglect, poverty, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and they have not been met with healing and restoration. And so it's just that we got to end that cycle of suffering. And I think that's what I'm hoping to do once I'm elected as DA.
All right, so let's get to know you a little bit better. I got some rapid fire questions here for you.
Yeah.
All right, so sunrise or sunset?
Ooh. I'll say sunset.
All right.
I like the sunset walks. Yeah.
When are you most productive during the day? Or it could be night.
Yeah, I think my kind of sweet spot for productivity is at night after the boys go to bed, and where it's kind of quiet. It's maybe like 10 p.m. to midnight, and that's when I'm able to get some things done and crank things out.
That's one of the quietest moments in my house too. All right, so I know you're a big football guy. So we just played a hard game of football at a local park in San Jose. Where are you going to take me to eat after?
Oh, it's a good question. Um, wow. So I'm a bit of a fast food junkie. So my first instinct was to say fast food like McDonald's, because but the reason I say that is because I have a lot of nostalgia with fast food. My dad passed away when I was younger, but I enjoyed a lot of experiences with him going through fast food drive-throughs, and
That's our
so
generation.
yeah, and I share a lot of experiences like that with my boys now. There's like a lot of nostalgia that comes with fast food, the drive-through, celebrating something with like going to McDonald's or going to Baskin Robbins. But in terms of a local spot, I would say if we played football in the morning, I would say we'd either go to Stan's Donuts in Santa Clara, or we would go to get a breakfast burrito at Cafe Rosalina on the Alameda. That's one of the spots. I actually just had a breakfast burrito there yesterday, so that's what comes to mind.
Nice. Best sports rivalry, A's Giants, Warriors Lakers, or Cal Stanford?
Yeah, you beat me to it. I would say Cal Stanford. I'm a Berkeley alum. My brothers went to Cal. One of my older brothers actually was a walk-on the Cal football team. So I grew up going to Cal games. I'm still a season ticket holder for Cal football, and there is not much sweeter than Cal beating Stanford in the big game. And actually, I was at the Cal Stanford big game this past fall and got to go down on the field after Cal won. And so I would say, yeah, Cal Stanford is probably the most meaningful to me.
All right, greatest of all time, Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali?
Oh, Muhammad Ali. Yeah, just for all the reasons, beyond, obviously he was heavyweight champion of the world multiple times, but then just his impact, his he like shook up the world in so many ways. And yeah, he's awesome. Although I do appreciate Mike Tyson too. I like both of them, but I would say Muhammad Ali.
So what's your favorite part about being a father to your boys?
Ooh, that's a deep question. Two things come to mind. One is how much of becoming a father is a mirror to my own experiences with my parents, and creating empathy for my mom and dad, recognizing their humanity. My becoming a father has actually cultivated deeper connection with my mom because I am able to relate to her better and just kind of understand her lived experiences as a mom, and the things that she was thinking about and going through. And then also has forced me, fatherhood has forced me to look in the mirror and reflect on my own traumas and my own struggles growing up, and really striving to be a better human being, for myself and in turn for the boys. And then on a lighter note, one of my favorite things is just enjoying. I have found such sweetness watching the boys play baseball. I grew up playing baseball. It's my first sports love, and so be able to share that with them, and to witness both of them take the sport on and enjoy it and play it. And then in particular, my older son Suleiman is pitching right now. I never pitched. I was always an infielder, and just to see him pitch, like, I don't know, there's something really magical about witnessing him compete, and I love it. And so as part of the campaign, I schedule around their games, because basically that's kind of non-negotiable time for me. So that's probably one of the sweeter parts of being a father to them.
Nice. So thank you for joining me today. I'll go ahead and give you a couple of minutes to kind of close it up, let people know how to reach you, what your campaign website is, stuff you have coming up, whether it's walks, to join you for canvassing. And, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, Zach, thank you. I have very much appreciated your partnership and brotherhood in this experience. I feel like I've known you much longer than we have, and you've been such a comrade in this movement. And I do call it a collective movement beyond my campaign, beyond your city council position, a collective movement to really ensure, like I said, the full dignity of our fellow human beings. So thank you, and thank you for introducing me to your network here today. In terms of how people can stay in touch with me, our website is votesajid.com, VOTESAJID.com. That's where you can contribute up to the $500 maximum per person, which we really do need all the financial support that we can get to reach voters before June. And then that's also where you can sign up to volunteer, and you can read more about me and our platform and my vision. And then on Instagram, we're here at the Sajid A. Khan, also on Twitter, same handle. We're on Facebook. I think it's Sajid Khan for DA. My email is sajid@votesajid.com. I check it habitually, and so you can access me there. And in terms of ways people can get involved, we have a canvas this Saturday at 10:30 at the Evergreen Community Center in San Jose. We're actually doing a joint canvas with Sunrise Silicon Valley, who's another endorser of our campaign. Should be really exciting and a lot of fun. I'm actually speaking to the South County Democratic Club this Saturday morning at 11:15, so kind of back to back. And then I think Zach, you and Rebecca Armendariz in Gilroy were working on a canvas on April 3rd, which is a Sunday. So I'm hopeful that the folks in Gilroy can come join us. And otherwise, we'll be canvassing every Saturday from here until June at 10:30. Check out my socials for the location, and we're going to be walking in the community, and really love people to come walk with us. So yeah, contribute, vote, walk, and follow, and let's make these visions and these hopes into a reality.
Sounds good. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay, Zach, thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody.
You too. Bye, everybody.